August 1986. In the dead of night on a quiet Wirral street, a 21-year-old bride-to-be runs out of petrol. She steps out of her turquoise van, walks along toward home, and vanishes into horror. Diane Sindall, loving, hard-working, planning her wedding, was bludgeoned with a crowbar, bitten like prey, left dying in a filthy alley just yards from traffic that never stopped. A monster struck in seconds. The police hunted their killer. They found their man, or so they thought. Peter Sullivan was branded the Beast of Birkenhead, locked away for 38 years as Britain's most reviled predator. But one DNA test changed everything. He was innocent. The real killer is still out there. This is the story of a murder that destroyed 2 lives, and a miscarriage of justice that lasted nearly 4 decades. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Diane Sindall entered the world on February 7, 1965, in the hard-working Merseyside landscape of northwest England, a modest suburb clinging to the Wirral Peninsula just across the wide, grey River Mersey from the pulse of Liverpool. Her mother was Wendy, her father Brian. She grew up surrounded by 2 sisters and 1 brother in the family home on Cressington Avenue, Tranmere, a quiet street where ordinary lives unfolded. At 5 feet 6 inches and slenderly built, Diane carried herself with a shy reserve, yet beneath it burned a tireless work ethic and an unwavering devotion to the man she intended to marry. The family ran a well-known local floristry business that anchored her days. From childhood, she helped out in her uncle's greengrocer's shop. Later, with his guidance and support, she opened her own small florist shop on Borough Road in Seacombe, barely yards from the flat she shared with her fiancé David Beattie. Every delivery run made her a familiar sight, the young blonde woman behind the wheel of her distinctive turquoise Fiat Fiorino van, weaving through the streets with armfuls of blooms. Locals knew her face, her smile, her kindness. She was friendly, hard-working, and genuinely part of the community fabric. David, 22 and steady-handed, repaired car bodies in a nearby garage owned by his friend. The two had been inseparable since age 16, first love sparked in Wirral school corridors. Their bond ran deep. They were already dreaming aloud of a 1987 wedding, a home and a future. Diane's determination showed in every early morning. 3 days a week, she rose at 4 a.m. to meet the flower market, gathering the freshest stems before dawn broke. To build their nest egg, she added 3 evening shifts behind the bar at the Wellington Pub on Bebbington Road in Bebbington, work she had taken on 6 months earlier, every pound saved for the life waiting ahead. At 21, she seemed to hold the promise of everything good, vibrant, optimistic, diligently saving, quietly thrilled at the thought of children someday. To friends and family, she remained kind-hearted and unassuming, finding joy in the everyday, the rhythm of her job, the familiar hum of her van, stolen moments with the people she loved most. Then came the night of August 1st, 1986, when that promise was ripped away in violence. The day began ordinarily enough. At 9 a.m, Diane started her shift at her uncle's greengrocer's on Borough Road in Seacombe, only steps away from her rented flat she shared with David. By 5 p.m, she clocked off and returned home, most likely spending a peaceful couple of hours with her fiancé before the evening pulled them apart. David had plans that night. He was to be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of his friend's business, the place where he worked as a car body repairer. At 8 p.m, Diane climbed into her turquoise van and drove to the Wellington Pub in Bebbington for her shift. After spending a typical evening pulling pints for the locals, she finished the shift at 11:30 p.m. Hungry after hours on her feet, she told her colleagues she would be stopping at a chip shop in Birkenhead, then onwards to the flat, eager for a quiet weekend with David. By 11:45 p.m, she was back on the road, heading home. But the streets were already turning dangerous. At approximately 11:50 p.m., a 17-year-old girl, dressed in a yellow jacket and yellow trousers, is attacked and indecently assaulted near Clifton Road off the busy Borough Road, and just a dozen or so yards from where the incoming Diane would run out of petrol. The teenager fought fiercely and escaped from her assailant. As midnight arrived on August 2nd, two joiners, labouring late at the Auto Safety Centre on the corner of Argyle Street South and Borough Road, watched as Diane's turquoise van rolled to a stop on the Pelican crossing. They saw her rummaging around inside the vehicle before stepping out, shutting the door and locking the van. She then began to walk up the busy Borough Road, heading away from the town centre towards Tranmere. Later it would become clear. The petrol tank had run empty. She had broken down, an innocent mechanical failure carrying cruel, fatal consequences. At exactly 12:03 a.m., a Crossfield bus driver called Gary Lamb noticed Diane passing the 42 bus stop on Borough Road. She was reaching into her brown handbag, glancing back repeatedly, clearly hoping for a late-night bus that would never appear. As he passed, he remembered he had thought to himself she had no chance. The service had ended for the night. By 12:10 a.m., a taxi driver cruising along Borough Road just after coming out of Argyle Street saw Diane in the midst of an argument with a man he sensed she knew. The man stretched out an arm to halt her progress, but she pushed forward. At one point, she walked backwards while he advanced toward her. They were definitely arguing. The man appeared about 20, 5 feet 10 inches tall, of slim build, clad in a brown leather jacket over a dark shirt with dark hair cropped short. And just moments after 12:10 a.m., a couple driving home caught sight of Diane walking alone, crossing at the junction of Borough Road and Whetstone Lane. It was the final confirmed glimpse of her alive. Meanwhile, at 12:30 a.m., her fiancé David returns to their flat, but Diane was not there. He assumed she had decided to stay at her parents' house instead and went to bed. The morning light brought tremendous horror. At noon on August 2nd, a female dog walker stumbled across Diane in a pool of blood inside a rubble-strewn laneway mere yards from the roaring Borough Road dual carriageway. At first glance, she mistook the figure for a discarded mannequin or shop dummy. Heart pounding, she ran to summon the police. Officers arrived swiftly, sealing the laneway and adjacent ground for meticulous forensic work. Diane lay naked from the waist down. Her bra and green and white spotted blouse had been yanked up around her neck. Her blue jeans, panties, and lime green shoes were gone, though her jewelry remained, engagement ring still on her finger, matching lime green earrings in place. Her brown leather patchwork handbag and burgundy purse, containing approximately 60 pounds, had vanished, likely taken by whoever had killed her. The damage to her head, face, and neck was severe. Savage lacerations, multiple fractures. Police described it as horrific. The weapon was likely a crowbar, wielded with repeated, crushing force. She had suffered. Also present were severe bite marks on her breasts. Bruising on her fingers hinted at a desperate struggle to ward off the blows, yet the ferocity overwhelmed her. She was likely rendered unconscious almost immediately and died soon after. Forensic teams worked carefully, gathering an array of fibers from the scene and recovering a semen sample. In 1986, the technology existed only to analyze it crudely. DNA profiling remained years away. The assault felt opportunistic, yet strangely personal, perhaps sparked by a chance meeting or escalating argument. The killer had not bothered to conceal the body. Her van keys rested near her, beside a telltale bloodstain believed to mark the spot of the first attack before she was dragged deeper into the shadows of the laneway. Close by lay her white plastic petrol can. She had obviously gone searching for a petrol station. Her Fiat van stood locked and abandoned on the pedestrian crossing near the roundabout beneath the flyover, roughly 500 yards back toward the direction she had came. A passing police officer later recalled noticing the vehicle parked there between 11:45 p.m. and midnight the previous night, and seeing it again untouched in the early hours as he drove by again. Chief Inspector Jeff Harrison assumed command. Heading a team of 100 detectives, shockwaves quickly rolled across Merseyside. Fear gripped women. Husbands began walking wives home from every shift and errand. On that August 2nd day, officers fanned out in a major search for the bludgeoning weapon. Door-to-door canvassing began in earnest. Investigators quickly formed an early theory. Diane's van had run empty. She had set off on foot with her plastic petrol can to find a filling station, and along Borough Road a stranger had struck. Merseyside police launched the largest manhunt in their history. In total, they would interview around 3,000 people. At one desperate point, they even weighed questioning every adult male in Birkenhead. The following day, August 3rd, brought a grim discovery. Dog walkers Anne and Jim, exercising their pets on Bidston Hill in Birkenhead, spotted a suspicious fire burning near Viner Road North. Drawing closer, Jim found a bag, jeans and other clothing ablaze, together with a charred Barclays paying-in book bearing a page marked with the name Sindall. At first the name meant nothing to him, but later realization dawned and they went and alerted police, who descended on the smoldering site. The following day, Monday, August 4th, detectives faced the press. They disclosed that a young woman, thought to be aged 18 to 19 and dressed in a yellow jacket and yellow trousers, had been seen on a bench around 12:20 a.m., just yards from the murder scene, distressed, comforted by a boy and a girl, claiming that she had been raped. But no report had come in. Police pleaded for this mystery victim to come and contact them. At the same press conference, Diane's fiancé David Beattie, voice cracking with grief, delivered an anguished plea. "Please give yourself up. This man must be sick. He knows who he is, but he cannot be so sick as to not feel guilt for what he has done. If anyone knows who did this to Diane, or is harboring this guy, then they must come forward." On August 5th, the police located the girl dressed in yellow who had been sexually assaulted. It turned out that she was aged just 17. She told police that she had been out with two friends when they had briefly separated. A man had then sprang from behind near Clifton Road and sexually assaulted her. She fought back fiercely, and he fled. Moments later, he walked past her again at the bus stop, hurling a crude remark before heading in the direction of the fatal laneway. Officers began constructing an attacker profile, positing the theory that this was potentially the same man who had killed Diane shortly after. More reports flooded in. It turned out that a string of minor sexual assaults and indecent exposures had been occurring along the very same Borough Road in this time period. The next day, August 6th, police circulated a description of the suspect in the assault on the teen girl dressed in yellow and potentially Diane's killer. He is aged around 40, 5 feet 4 inches tall, slightly built, scruffily dressed in a jacket and trousers, with 3 days stubble and a noticeable deformity or tick in his right eye. Witnesses placed this same man walking past Diane's turquoise van earlier. On August 7th, a shattered David Beattie decided to move into the Sindall family home in Tranmere. The flat he had once shared with Diane had become unbearable, every corner haunted by her absence. It is said that he would spend the next 12 years mourning in grief. On the evening of August 8th, police mounted a reconstruction of Diane's last movements. A female officer, clad in the same white t-shirt with green spots and blue jeans, retraced Diane's final path from the pub through the streets to Borough Road in a bid to jog memories and snare the killer. The reconstruction triggered hundreds of tip-line calls over the days that followed, each followed up with vigor. Nearly a week later, August 14th, the scruffy middle-aged man with the eye deformity is formally eliminated from the murder inquiry. He had been hunted chiefly for the assault on the 17-year-old in yellow, but that link evaporated. The police were able to eliminate him through geographic alibi, and he was deemed not responsible for either of the attacks. Police then shifted their focus. They put out an appeal for a man approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall wearing a blue jacket who had been seen peering through a gap in a fence on the Borough Road around midnight on the night of the murder. On August 18th, an image was released of a dark brown suede leather jacket, size small, 36, that was recovered mostly intact from the Bidston Hill fire alongside Diane's jeans and handbag. It is thought that this jacket is owned by the killer. Detectives urged the public to report anyone known to own such a garment and to come forward immediately. It is noted that the lime green shoes and the murder weapon were still missing. Another appeal went out for the driver of a white Ford Sierra spotted parked close to the body deposition site around the time of the killing, though this driver is never traced. On August 28th came breaking news of an arrest. The arrested man claimed to police that he had stumbled upon Diane's body at 6 a.m. on that August 2nd day, and that he had stolen her brown handbag, jeans, earrings, money, and that he had carried the items to Bidston Hill and set them alight the next day. But only hours later, he then retracted everything, insisting the story was a complete fabrication, drawn from press reports and a conversation that he had had with a policeman. He would face repeated questioning over the coming weeks, but would never be charged. At the trial of another man that would be soon charged with Diane's murder, this man would be mentioned in proceedings and referred to only as Mr. X. On the 1st of September, detectives released a photograph of a handwritten shopping list discovered near the charred clothing on Bidston Hill. Though they could not confirm a link to the case, they appealed for anyone who recognized the handwriting to contact them nonetheless. Just 4 days later, on September 5th, 2 Photofit images appeared across the press. Men reportedly seen loitering near Borough Road around the time of the murder. One of these men had been seen walking away from the scene between midnight and 12:15 a.m. He was aged 40s with a ruddy complexion, with possibly suntanned skin, about 5 foot 8 inches in height, and a medium build with dark, greasy hair brushed back. The second man is said to be aged between 22 to 28. He had long, straight black hair parted in the middle and was possibly carrying a jacket. This individual had been observed walking just 15 yards behind Diane on the Borough Road. On September 18th, the BBC's flagship programme Crimewatch aired Diane's case to millions nationwide with a vivid reconstruction of Diane's last journey. The first wave of public response was disappointing, but among the calls came crucial new information that would redirect the entire inquiry. Then came a major bombshell in the case. On the 25th of September, news broke of another arrest. A 29-year-old man living in social housing in central Birkenhead had been taken in on suspicion of murder. A viewer had phoned into the Crimewatch Appeal and claimed that they had seen him near the fire on Bidston Hill. He endured 5 grueling days of questioning before being bailed pending further inquiries. On October 8th, a 23-year-old bingo hall worker named Anthony Jenkins of Wallasey was convicted of the indecent assault on the 17-year-old girl dressed in yellow. He had admitted to the offence and requested that several other theft charges be taken into consideration. Police had found some 42 pairs of women's knickers in his home. He promptly admitted to police to having stolen them from washing lines across the Wirral. He is sentenced to 2 years probation and a £40 fine. On October 14th, Peter Sullivan, aged 29, unemployed of Birkenhead, is charged with Diane's murder before Wirral Magistrates Court. Amid a furious, packed courtroom, he was remanded to Risley Prison. He would return to court some 20 times over the following year before his trial opened in September 1987, where he entered a plea of not guilty. This marked the start of one of Britain's gravest miscarriages of justice. An innocent man would spend 38 years in prison for a crime he always denied. Peter Sullivan was an unemployed labourer, a self-described petty thief. He had learning difficulties and limited intellectual capacity. Psychologists described him as suggestible and acquiescent, vulnerabilities that demanded safeguards such as an appropriate adult during questioning, but none was provided. Across 22 interviews spanning 4 weeks, he was denied legal advice for the first 7 sessions, with police insisting it would hinder the inquiry. He alleged brutal treatment, beaten twice in his cell with a blanket thrown over him to muffle the sound of truncheons striking, deprived of food and sleep, threatened with charges for 35 other rapes unless he confessed. Under that pressure, he broke and confessed, the first confession unrecorded, including details of the clothing location in Bidston Hill. He would later claim an officer had guided his finger across a map to the correct spot when he had initially pointed to the wrong place. On September 25th, he retracted everything after finally gaining access to a solicitor, scrawling "This is all lies" across the police maps. But the damage was done. He remained on remand for a full year until trial. On the 21st of September 1987, Peter Sullivan's trial commenced at Liverpool Crown Court. Over several grueling weeks, the jury listened to back-and-forth testimony, often fiercely contested, from both prosecution and defense. Forensic odontologist Dr. Gordon MacDonald took to the stand and declared unequivocally that the bite marks on Diane's breasts had came from Sullivan's highly distinctive teeth, calling the match perfect and beyond doubt. A second expert, Liverpool University senior dental lecturer Dr. John Scott, had initially informed police that he felt it was unlikely Sullivan was responsible and questioned whether one mark had even been made by human teeth, but after some consultations he then aligned with MacDonald. The defense attacked the reliability of the field itself, describing forensic odontology as developing and potentially overconfident, though no opposing expert was called. The jury also learned of brown polyester fibers and other fibers recovered from the crime scene that allegedly matched trousers Sullivan owned at the time. Further fibers were presented as matching a sofa from Sullivan's home. A witness claimed to recognize Sullivan as the man seen at Bidston Hill around the time the fire was lit to destroy evidence. Detectives took to the stand and recounted how Sullivan allegedly broke into tears during interviews, admitting he had been present at Bidston Hill but insisting he only went for fresh air. He denied the murder outright, pleading with officers to believe him. The pathologist who performed the post-mortem testified that Diane's injuries were the worst he had ever encountered. He detailed a broken jaw, skull fractures, and bruising to her fingers, clear signs she had tried to fend off the blows. In his opinion, the murder weapon was likely the 18-inch crowbar the prosecution displayed to the jury, a tool belonging to Sullivan's neighbor and allegedly borrowed by Sullivan previously. Evidence from the interviews was read. Sullivan stated he had spent the day with his mother and returned home by 6 p.m., had watched television with his wife and 2 stepsons, and never left the house again until the following day. The prosecution countered sharply, alleging that he had in fact been out drinking and playing darts until around midnight in a pub close to Borough Road. The court then heard about Mr. X, the first man to be arrested. The defense highlighted the fact that this man claimed to have discovered Diane's body earlier that morning and that he had stolen her belongings and burnt them on Bidston Hill. He had offered intimate details, particularly surrounding the body's positioning and the facial injuries and the stolen items. Yet the prosecution highlighted that he later rescinded this confession, suggesting he could have gleaned these specifics from newspaper reports and a conversation with a policeman. The court learned that he was ultimately eliminated by police because the bite marks on the victim's breasts allegedly did not match his teeth. Toward the trial's close, audio evidence played to a hushed courtroom. In one recorded interview, Sullivan allegedly admitted asking Diane for the time before attacking her with a brick, then telling detectives, "I don't know why I hit her." But under cross-examination, the detective faced accusations of coercion, deliberately interrupting Sullivan just as he began to mention a deal the officer had offered him in the toilets prior. The detective denied this vehemently. The jury retired with the immense burden of determining guilt or innocence. On November 4th, 1987, they returned, guilty as charged. Sullivan stood impassive as the judge sentenced him to life, calling the crime a considerable abomination and outrage. After conviction, Sullivan was immediately categorized as a Category A, the highest security level, and transferred to HMP Wakefield, notoriously known as Monster Mansion for its roster of infamous inmates. At 30, he embarked on a life sentence with a minimum tariff of 16 years. His legal team advised there were no viable grounds for an immediate appeal. Over the next 38 years, he languished in isolation, an innocent man, while the media relentlessly branded him the Beast of Birkenhead, the Mersey Ripper, and the Wolfman, fixating on the bite marks and portraying his supposed ferocity as almost supernatural. Tabloids sensationalized every aspect, painting him as a monstrous sexual predator. Public revulsion boiled over. Fellow inmates assaulted him repeatedly because of the crime's nature. Despite learning difficulties and a suggestible nature, Sullivan clung to his innocence, refusing to admit guilt even when doing so might have opened parole after 2003, a choice typical in miscarriage cases that extended his imprisonment. Yet grief compounded his torment. Both of his parents died while he was inside, his mother in 2013. Authorities denied him compassionate leave to attend her funeral. The refusal deepened his isolation. Years later, he would say he had lost everything, including the chance to say goodbye. His battle for justice met wall after wall. The first application of the Criminal Cases Review Commission came in the early 2000s, but it was rejected in 2008 for lack of sufficient new evidence to undermine reliance on the confessions and bite mark forensics, with the bite mark evidence now widely discredited. He pressed on, lodging a direct appeal to the Court of Appeal in 2019 without CCRC backing. It too was dismissed in 2021 on similar grounds. These failures kept him trapped, labeled a denier in the prison system, barred from many rehabilitation programs, and locked in high-security conditions. Then, in March 2021, Sullivan reapplied to the CCRC. Advances in forensic science finally allowed modern DNA testing of the preserved semen samples from the crime scene. The results were decisive. Sullivan was excluded as the source. A full unknown male profile emerged. This sample did not match her fiancé David or any close associates. This sample also did not match anyone within the national DNA database. This evidence, unavailable in earlier reviews, convinced the CCRC the conviction was unsafe. They referred the case back to the Court of Appeal in 2023. Then on May 13, 2025, at the Royal Court of Justice in London, Lord Justice Timothy Holroyd, joined by Mr. Justice Goss and Mr. Justice Bryan, delivered a landmark ruling. They quashed the 1987 murder conviction, declaring the new DNA evidence made it impossible to regard the conviction as safe. At 68, one of Britain's longest-serving prisoners, Sullivan walked free from Category A HMP Wakefield around 2:15 p.m. that day. He had appeared emotional via video link during the hearing. When the verdict came, he wept openly. Sullivan faced reporters with quiet words. He felt no anger, no bitterness, but he acknowledged the devastation. "I have lost everything, including the chance to attend his parents' funerals." His lawyer called the moment unprecedented and historic, one of the UK's most prolonged miscarriages of justice. 38 years served, 22 years more than his minimum 16 years. In January 2026, Merseyside Police, partnering with Crime Stoppers, announced a £20,000 reward for information leading to the identification, arrest and conviction of Diane Sindall's killer. The appeal stressed the preserved unknown male DNA profile as a potential key and urged anyone with suspicions, especially about relatives or acquaintances from 1986, to come forward anonymously. The case remains active and open. Officers continue chasing leads and requesting voluntary samples where appropriate. No arrests have been made. The perpetrator is still unidentified, perhaps having emigrated, perhaps deceased, and perhaps still evading justice after nearly 40 years. Diane Sindall was more than a name in a tragic headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a fiancée, and a young woman whose life brimmed with quiet dreams and genuine kindness. At just 21, she worked tirelessly to build a future with love, a wedding in 1987, and the simple joys of family and flowers. Nearly 4 decades later, the pain of her loss endures, etched into the memorial stone on Borough Road, where flowers are still placed in her memory. Diane deserved so much more: a long life, laughter with children, growing old with David. She was not defined by the horror that ended her days, but by the light she carried through them. May she rest in peace, remembered not for how she died, but for how fully and gently she lived. Thank you for watching and listening to Diane's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.